When we look at Rome in the years after Aquae Sextiae, it's a story of recovery and revenge. The Teutones are gone, but the Cimbri are still marching south, and Rome is finally catching its breath after decades of near disasters. How does a superpower finally finish what almost destroyed it? Hello, we are Great History, your daily history channel, bringing you 30 minutes of history every day. If you want to help decide what appears next on this channel, don't forget to subscribe and help us reach 50,000 subscribers. So today, we'll explore the northern campaigns of Gaius, Marius, and Quintus Lutatius Catulus. We'll recap the disaster at Arausio, the reforms Marius implemented in the legions, and his first revenge at Aquae Sextiae, all leading up to Rome's chance to end the Germanic threat once and for all. In the aftermath of the Battle of Arausio in 105 BC, where Rome suffered one of its most devastating defeats, the Cimbri, along with their allies, the Teutones and Ambrones, did not immediately press further into Italy. Instead, they continued their southward migration through Gaul, moving with a large contingent that included not only warriors, but also women, children, the elderly, and livestock. This movement was not merely a military campaign, but a mass migration, with estimates suggesting a total number of around 120,000 individuals, including non-combatants. The challenges faced by such a large migrating population were immense. Logistically, moving tens of thousands of people along with their herds and supplies required careful planning and coordination. The terrain of Gaul posed additional difficulties, with dense forests and rugged landscapes complicating their journey. Morale among the migrants fluctuated, influenced by the hardships of travel, scarcity of resources, and the constant threat of Roman retaliation. Exhaustion from prolonged movement and the psychological toll of continuous warfare further strained their resolve. This prolonged presence on the borders of Italy posed a direct threat to the Republic's territorial integrity. The potential for widespread destruction and displacement was significant, and the Romans recognized that failure to address the threat could result in the loss of their holdings in Gaul and possibly even parts of Italy itself. The Cimbri's migration was not just a military threat, but also a socio-political challenge. The movement of such a large group of people could lead to the destabilization of local economies, the displacement of populations, and the disruption of trade and agriculture. These factors compounded the military threat and required a multifaceted Roman response. In contrast, Rome had begun to recover from its earlier defeats. Under the leadership of Gaius Marius, significant military reforms were implemented, professionalizing the Roman army and increasing its effectiveness. However, the presence of the Cimbri and their allies necessitated a sustained military effort to secure the Republic's borders and maintain stability. The Cimbri's decision to delay their advance into Italy after Arausio gave Rome a critical window to reorganize and prepare. Had the Cimbri pressed their advantage immediately, Rome might have faced even greater difficulties in mounting an effective defense. However, the delay also allowed the Cimbri to continue their migration through Gaul, potentially increasing their numbers and resources. This prolonged presence in Roman territories kept the threat alive and necessitated a sustained Roman military response. The presence of such a large and mobile force on the borders of Italy created a crisis far beyond the battlefield. Rome wasn't just facing tens of thousands of enemy soldiers. They were confronting a socio-political challenge on a continental scale. Entire villages could be displaced, local economies disrupted, and trade routes and agricultural production thrown into chaos. Farmers and townspeople in northern Italy and southern Gaul lived under the constant shadow of invasion, knowing that a single misstep could result in loss of land, property, or even life. This created a domino effect. Displaced populations could flow toward Roman settlements, putting pressure on resources, spreading fear, and forcing Roman magistrates to allocate troops for security, logistics, and administration. Essentially, the Romans faced a combined challenge: a potential battlefield confrontation and the ongoing responsibility of maintaining stability in the provinces, all while ensuring that their reorganized army was ready for decisive engagement. In response to this threat, the Roman Senate appointed Gaius Marius and Quintus Lutatius Catulus as consuls in 101 BC. Marius, having already achieved success in the Jugurthine War, was tasked with leading the Roman forces against the Cimbri. Catulus, his co-consul, was assigned to command the forces in northern Italy. The two leaders coordinated their efforts, with Marius leading a force of approximately 32,000 legionaries and Catulus commanding around 20,000 troops. Together, they amassed a formidable army of about 50,000 soldiers to confront the Cimbri. Marius carefully selected the terrain for the battle, choosing the plains near Vercelli in northern Italy. This location offered advantages, such as river crossings, open fields, and lines of retreat, which were crucial for maneuvering and logistics. The Romans deployed their legions in a defensive formation, utilizing their superior training and discipline to withstand the Cimbri's attacks. Marius's tactics, including the use of terrain to his advantage and the strategic placement of his forces, played a significant role in the Roman victory. The psychological preparation of the Roman soldiers played a crucial role in their success at Vercelli. After the catastrophic defeat at Arausio, the Roman military had undergone a comprehensive transformation under the guidance of Gaius Marius. One of the most significant reforms was the recruitment of landless citizens, the caput censi, who previously had been excluded from military service. These men, who now formed the backbone of the legions, were trained and equipped by the state, creating a professional army whose loyalty lay with their commanders rather than with Rome itself. Standardized equipment, rigorous training routines, and an emphasis on discipline ensured that the Roman legions were no longer a loosely organized militia, but a cohesive and highly effective fighting force. Morale among the troops was further strengthened by their recent victory at Aquae Sextiae, where they had decisively defeated the Teutones. That triumph not only demonstrated the effectiveness of Marius's reforms, but also instilled confidence in his leadership and strategic acumen. Soldiers now believed in their commander and in their own abilities, a psychological edge that would prove critical against the formidable Cimbri. Veterans of earlier campaigns and fresh recruits alike understood that their discipline, cohesion, and training could counter the vast numbers and brute strength of their enemy. On the battlefield, Marius took command of the left wing, while Quintus Lutatius Catulus led the center. Lucius Cornelius Sulla, serving as a legate, commanded the cavalry on the right wing. Together, these leaders coordinated a force of approximately 54,000 soldiers, composed of both Roman legionaries and allied contingents. The core of this army was heavy infantry, organized into maniples, arranged in the triplex acies formation. The three lines, the hastati, young and relatively inexperienced soldiers. The principes, more seasoned and battle-tested troops. And the triarii, veteran soldiers, loud for remarkable flexibility. Each line could support the others, rotate in combat, or hold the line against overwhelming attacks. Light infantry skirmishers provided harassment and flexibility, while cavalry units, both Roman and Allied, offered mobility, reconnaissance, and the ability to strike the flanks or rear of the enemy. The Cimbri, by contrast, were led by King Borix, with Cleoticus and Caesarix assisting in overall command. Their forces were estimated at roughly 50,000 warriors, with a larger population of non-combatants, including women, children, the elderly, and livestock, accompanying them as they migrated through northern Italy. Their military structure relied primarily on dense infantry formations reminiscent of a phalanx. They had limited cavalry, approximately 15,000 strong, and lacked a disciplined command structure. Instead, depending heavily on tribal cohesion and the leadership of their kings. Cimbri tactics were straightforward, but risky. Mass frontal assaults designed to use sheer numbers to crush the opposition. They advanced in tight formations, hoping that the weight of their infantry would break the enemy lines. Yet, this reliance on numerical superiority came with serious weaknesses. Their formations were inflexible and slow to respond to sudden maneuvers or unexpected threats. They had minimal reconnaissance and poor awareness of the battlefield, making them vulnerable to the Romans' coordinated attacks and clever use of terrain, while the Cimbri were formidable in raw strength and intimidation. Their lack of tactical sophistication and organizational discipline left them exposed to a well-trained, strategically minded opponent like Marius and his legions. Marius commanded a formidable force of roughly 52,000 to 54,000 soldiers, a mix of Roman legionaries and allied auxiliaries, all meticulously trained and disciplined under his reforms. To maximize battlefield effectiveness, he divided his army into 3 divisions. Marius personally led the left wing, ensuring direct oversight of the crucial flank. The center was commanded by Quintus Lutatius Catulus, a trusted colleague whose experience and steadiness helped anchor the Roman line. On the right wing, the cavalry, under the command of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, provided mobility and the ability to strike at critical moments. This tripartite arrangement allowed the Romans to coordinate attacks from multiple angles, giving their flexible manipular formations a significant advantage over the larger but less organized Cimbri forces. The manipular system itself, a key innovation of Roman military organization, allowed each small unit to maneuver independently while maintaining cohesion with the larger army, a crucial factor in facing a masked enemy. The battle was set on the Rhodan Plain in Cisalpine Gaul, what we today call northern Italy. A flat and open expanse ideally suited for Roman tactics. Marius carefully considered the environment in his planning. He positioned his forces so that the morning sun would rise behind the Romans, shining directly into the eyes of the approaching Cimbri and blinding them at the start of the engagement. Furthermore, the prevailing winds carried dust and debris toward the enemy, adding to their disorientation and frustration. By exploiting natural elements like sunlight, wind, and terrain, Marius turned the battlefield itself into a tactical weapon. For the Cimbri, who were used to migrating through forests and river valleys with their massive population, these conditions were unfamiliar and unsettling, reducing the effectiveness of their usual overwhelming charges. The Cimbri, under King Beryx and his subordinate leaders, Claudicus and Caesarix, responded with a massive square formation, spreading over roughly 10 square miles. Their strategy relied heavily on sheer numbers, approximately 50,000 warriors arranged in dense infantry blocks, accompanied by roughly 15,000 cavalry. This dense configuration was designed to crush any resistance through brute force, reflecting their reliance on mass and intimidation rather than tactical finesse. However, such a formation came with critical weaknesses. The tightly packed infantry limited maneuverability, making the Cimbri inflexible and slow to respond to sudden Roman movements. Coordination among units was poor, and command structures were minimal, relying on the kings and tribal cohesion rather than a system of disciplined officers. Marius's planning also accounted for psychological factors. The Romans, fresh from their victory at Aquae against the Teutones, carried high morale and confidence in their commander's strategies. Soldiers had trained rigorously, drilling in manipular formations and practicing coordinated attacks with cavalry support. These exercises ensured that when the Cimbri advanced, the Roman legions were prepared to absorb the initial shock, hold firm, and then counterattack with precision. Light infantry skirmishers and the cavalry under Sulla were positioned to harass flanks and create openings, further exploiting the Cimbri's rigid formations. In this setup, the Romans combined numbers, discipline, and tactical foresight against the Cimbri's numerical advantage. The Cimbri's dense mass of warriors looked imposing, but the lack of flexibility, poor reconnaissance, and inability to adapt to environmental conditions meant that Marius's army held the decisive edge. The stage was set for a battle in which Roman strategy, discipline, and leadership would confront the sheer size and ambition of a migrating northern people. This careful combination of terrain exploitation, environmental manipulation, and precise troop deployment demonstrates why the Rhodan Plain at Vercelli became the site of one of Rome's most decisive and strategically brilliant victories. As the battle began, the Romans remained perfectly stationary, forcing the massive Cimbri army to advance across open terrain. This deliberate positioning gave the Romans an immediate advantage. The sunlight glinted off their polished helmets and armor, creating a blinding glare that made it difficult for the Cimbri to see clearly. At the same time, the morning winds carried clouds of dust and debris straight toward the enemy, adding another layer of disorientation and psychological pressure. What might have looked like a straightforward march for the Cimbri quickly became a struggle to maintain cohesion as they approached the disciplined Roman lines. The Cimbri, confident in their sheer numbers and reputation for overwhelming opponents, relied on a direct frontal assault to break the Roman defenses. Their army was massive, phalanx-like formations. Despite their intimidating size, these formations were rigid and lacked tactical flexibility, which Marius had anticipated. Roman scouts and cavalry, under the command of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, took advantage of this by constantly probing and harassing the flanks of the advancing Cimbri. Small skirmishes, feigned retreats, and hit-and-run attacks kept the Cimbri off balance, slowing their advance and disrupting their organizational structure. This early harassment bought the Roman legions crucial time to prepare for the full engagement. When the two forces finally collided, Marius's legions held their ground with remarkable discipline. Years of reforms, training, and experience under Marius had transformed these troops into a cohesive fighting force capable of withstanding the initial shock of a mass assault. The Roman infantry was arranged in flexible manipular formations, with the youngest and least experienced soldiers in the front line, the more experienced in the second, and veteran triarii forming a solid third line. This arrangement allowed the Romans to absorb the Cimbri charge without breaking, while maintaining the ability to counterattack effectively. The decisive moment came as Sulla's cavalry struck the Cimbri flanks. This maneuver, executed with precise timing, caused confusion and panic among the enemy. The dense Cimbri formations, which had relied on the momentum of their mass, could not adapt quickly to the sudden disruption. As chaos spread through their ranks, the Roman infantry pressed forward, exploiting every gap and weakness. Soldiers fought in close quarters with superior training, discipline, and equipment, gradually breaking down the enemy's morale. Marius then reinforced the Roman center with reserves, adding pressure on the already disorganized Cimbri front. The combined effect of infantry pressure from the center and flanking attacks by the cavalry created a near-perfect encirclement. Panic set in among the Cimbri warriors. What had begun as a coordinated and confident assault quickly devolved into a chaotic rout. Many were cut down where they stood, some were trampled in the melee, and others fled toward the rivers and surrounding plains, only to be pursued by relentless Roman forces. By the end of the day, the Roman legions had decisively dismantled the Cimbri threat. Marius's strategic planning, the discipline and training of his soldiers, and the coordinated use of terrain, weather, and flexible formations had turned what could have been a massacre into a crushing victory. The battle demonstrated not only Roman military superiority, but also the effectiveness of professional, well-led legions in facing numerically superior enemies. Vercelli would be remembered as a master class in strategy, coordination, and execution, a testament to Marius's genius and the resilience of Rome itself. Central to Rome's success was the rigorous discipline and training of its soldiers. The Roman legions were renowned for their ability to execute complex maneuvers and maintain cohesion under pressure. This discipline was a product of continuous training, strict adherence to orders, and a deep-seated belief in the superiority of Roman arms. Unlike the Cimbri, whose warriors were formidable, but lacked the same level of training and organization, the Roman soldiers were adept at executing coordinated tactics that exploited the weaknesses of their enemies. The Roman army's use of the manipular formation was a significant factor in its battlefield success. This formation, developed during the Samnite Wars, replaced the rigid phalanx with a more flexible structure composed of 3 lines: the hastati, principes, and triarii. Each line was designed to engage the enemy at different stages of the battle, allowing for a dynamic response to changing circumstances. The manipular system enabled the Romans to adapt quickly to battlefield conditions, a crucial advantage against the less flexible Cimbri formations. Roman commanders understood the importance of integrating infantry and cavalry operations at Vercelli. This coordination was evident as the Roman cavalry, commanded by Lucius Cornelius Sulla, engaged the Cimbri cavalry on the flanks, disrupting their formations and causing confusion. Meanwhile, the Roman infantry held their ground, maintaining a solid front that absorbed and repelled the Cimbri's attacks. This synchronized effort created a pincer movement that encircled the Cimbri, leading to their eventual collapse. The Cimbri's military strategy heavily depended on their vast numbers. This numerical advantage allowed them to inflict devastating defeats on the Romans, but it also meant that their success was contingent on maintaining such large forces. As their numbers dwindled due to attrition and Roman resistance, their ability to sustain their campaigns diminished. One of the critical weaknesses of the Cimbri was their lack of a cohesive command structure. Unlike the Romans, who had a well-organized military hierarchy, the Cimbri operated with a more decentralized leadership. This lack of coordination hindered their ability to respond effectively to dynamic battlefield situations. The Cimbri's formation and tactics made them susceptible to flank attacks. Their dense, massed formations, while imposing, lacked the flexibility to counter Roman cavalry and infantry maneuvers. At Vercelli, the Roman cavalry, under the command of Lucius Cornelius Sulla, exploited this vulnerability by attacking the Cimbri's flanks, causing disarray and contributing to their eventual collapse. Another significant disadvantage for the Cimbri was their limited reconnaissance capabilities. Without effective scouting, they were often unaware of the terrain and the positioning of enemy forces. The Cimbri suffered devastating losses at Vercelli. Estimates of their casualties vary, with ancient sources reporting between 120,000 and 160,000 killed, and approximately 60,000 captured. Notably, their leaders, including King Borix, were either killed in battle or captured. Borix's death symbolized the collapse of Cimbrian leadership and morale. Other leaders, such as Cleodicus and Cassarix, were taken prisoner and paraded in Rome before being executed, underscoring the complete defeat of the Cimbri. The scale of the Cimbrian losses rendered them incapable of posing a significant threat to Rome thereafter. Surviving members of the tribe either assimilated into other groups or disappeared from historical records, marking the end of the Cimbri as a distinct entity. In contrast, Roman casualties were remarkably low, with estimates ranging from 1,000 to 3,000 killed. This disparity highlighted the effectiveness of Roman military strategy and discipline. The victory at Vercelli not only eliminated the immediate Cimbrian threat, but also restored Roman confidence following previous defeats, such as the catastrophic loss at the Battle of Arausio in 105 BC. Gaius Marius emerged from the conflict with his reputation firmly established as one of Rome's most capable generals. His decisive leadership against the Cimbri, combined with the reforms he had instituted after the disaster at Arausio, showcased his strategic brilliance. Marius's enhanced prestige was not just a personal victory. It reshaped the perception of military leadership in Rome, demonstrating that skill, preparation, and innovation could overcome even overwhelming numerical odds. His success also highlighted the importance of professional soldiers and disciplined legions in an era when Rome had once relied primarily on citizen soldiers drawn from landholding classes. One immediate consequence of Vercelli was the consolidation of power among military leaders. While Marius held overall command, Quintus, Lutatius, Catulus, and other commanders shared in the campaign, which naturally sparked debates over credit and authority. Marius's decisive actions, including granting Roman citizenship to some Italian allies without explicit Senate approval, reflected the increasing political weight carried by successful generals. It became clear that battlefield achievements now translated directly into influence within the Senate and among the Roman populace, shifting the balance of power from the traditional political elite toward those who could command armies effectively. The Senate itself gained renewed confidence in Rome's professionalized military system. The Cimbrian threat had underscored the inadequacies of the old levy-based forces, and the triumph at Vercelli validated the reforms Marius had enacted after Arausio. Recruiting the landless poor, the Capite Censi transformed the army from a temporary militia into a permanent professional force. Soldiers no longer returned home after a campaign. Instead, their livelihood, equipment, and prospects for rewards, like land or pensions, were tied directly to continued service. This professionalization created a standing army that could respond to crises quickly, train consistently, and maintain cohesion in the face of large-scale threats. Marius's reforms were further reinforced in practice at Vercelli. Training became standardized across all legions, and equipment was uniform, ensuring that every soldier could operate effectively in coordinated maneuvers. The manipular and cohort-based formations, honed through rigorous drills, provided both tactical flexibility and battlefield resilience. Roman commanders could adjust formations in real time, use terrain to their advantage, and integrate infantry and cavalry in coordinated assaults, capabilities the Cimbri lacked. The disciplined, well-equipped legions now served as a model for all future Roman armies, proving that professionalization was not only feasible, but decisive in combat. The battle also had long-term consequences for Rome's enemies. The annihilation of the Cimbri's leadership, including their king Borix, decimated their capacity to organize further resistance. Without experienced commanders and cohesive structures, these migrating tribes could no longer pose a sustained military threat to the Republic. The defeat illustrated the limits of mass tribal assaults against well-trained, strategically led forces. While the Cimbri had relied on sheer numbers and brute force, the Romans demonstrated that superior discipline, training, and tactical innovation could overcome even the largest hordes. Beyond the immediate battlefield effects, Vercelli had a lasting impact on the Roman military and political system. It confirmed the wisdom of Marius's reforms, reinforced the Senate's trust in professional armies, and shifted the dynamics between commanders and the state. Soldiers became more loyal to their generals than to Rome itself, a change that, while effective in the short term, would eventually contribute to the political instability and civil wars of the late Republic. Yet, in 101 BC, these reforms were undeniably successful. They preserved Rome, eliminated a major northern threat for generations, and established a model of military organization that would define the Republic's armies for decades. The triumph at Vercelli became a cornerstone in the narrative of Roman heroism and military excellence. The battle was portrayed as a testament to Roman virtues, such as discipline, courage, and strategic foresight. These themes were not only celebrated in contemporary accounts, but also immortalized in later Roman literature and art. The depiction of the battle served as a model of Roman military prowess and became a source of inspiration for future generations.